On the night of September 23, 1944, at precisely 11:47 p.m., Captain Everett Pope crouched behind a jagged coral outcropping in the Horseshoe Valley of Peleliu, watching Japanese soldiers emerge from limestone caves like phantoms conjured by moonlight, their movements slow, deliberate, and confident, as if the darkness itself belonged to them. And at just 25 years old, Pope commanded what remained of Company B, a shattered remnant of 90 Marines out of the 242 who had charged Hill 100 only 4 days earlier, a hill that intelligence had dismissed as lightly defended, but which had instead devoured 152 men in 6 hours of merciless fighting, leaving bodies tangled among coral ridges and cave mouths where Type 99 machine guns and Arisaka rifles had poured fire from invisible angles. And now Pope surveyed a valley 150 yards wide, a natural depression surrounded on 3 sides by ridgelines honeycombed with caves sheltering an estimated 2,000 Japanese troops, a terrain configuration that violated every principle drilled into him at Quantico: never surrender high ground, never fight from a concave position, never allow the enemy to surround you. And yet doctrine offered no solutions for an enemy that had perfected night infiltration, slipping through Marine lines like smoke and leaving 14 Americans dead in 72 hours of relentless cat-and-mouse warfare, and traditional wisdom demanded retreat, consolidation, and reinforcement, the same defensive reflexes that had shaped Marine battles since Guadalcanal. But as Pope watched the first Japanese squad creep across the valley floor, testing his perimeter with the casual assurance of men who believed the Americans feared darkness, he made a decision that shattered the Marine handbook entirely, ordering his men to hold fire and let the enemy come closer, to let them believe they had won, because Pope understood something his enemy did not. That confidence was a weapon, and tonight he intended to turn Japanese night doctrine into a liability. And when dawn broke, revealing the carnage of Hill 100, Pope pulled himself from coral rubble with torn utilities and blood-stained hands and counted the dead, listening as Corporal Martinez reported that only 91 Marines were still breathing and only 8 unwounded, and Pope did the math silently, understanding that Company B was now smaller than a reinforced platoon and surrounded by an enemy that had turned limestone into a fortress of interlocking caves, tunnels, and firing ports invisible until muzzle flashes betrayed them. And as Sergeant Ollie pointed out 12 visible cave openings on the northern ridge alone, Pope grasped that Hill 100 was not a single objective but a connected system designed not to be held, but to bleed attackers dry, and the original plan, to seize the hill and link with 2nd Battalion, had died with the Marines scattered across the slope, forcing Pope to confront a brutal truth. Conventional assault tactics were useless here, because the Japanese were not defending terrain, they were defending time, trading space for American blood. And as ammunition counts dropped to desperate levels and wounded men lay in shallow coral scrapes, Pope realized retreat meant abandoning Marines who could not move, something he refused to do. And so somewhere between exhaustion, rage, and clarity, Pope began to think not like a Marine assault commander, but like a Japanese defender. And by dawn on September 20th, he made the decision that would redefine the fight, ordering his men not to advance or retreat, but to descend into the valley itself and establish a concave defensive perimeter around the valley floor, a position any academy instructor would have failed instantly. But Pope saw what doctrine did not, that the valley was not a trap unless you allowed it to be. And as machine guns were dragged into position, mortars placed on coral shelves, and fighting holes scraped into unforgiving ground, Pope carefully designed overlapping fields of fire that covered every inch of open ground, turning the valley floor into a controlled killing zone, while Japanese troops moved confidently across it in daylight, carrying supplies without security, unaware they were walking through the jaws of a trap. And as Pope watched them through binoculars, he knew the enemy still believed the Marines were beaten, still believed darkness belonged to them. And when night fell and the first Japanese infiltration squad descended at 2,200 hours, Pope waited until they were fully committed, until they crossed into open ground, and then unleashed hell, with M1917 Brownings hammering sustained fire, Garand's cracking in disciplined cadence, and mortar illumination transforming night into day, catching the Japanese exposed and helpless. 8 men killed in under 30 seconds, their bodies left sprawled as warnings, and over the following nights the pattern repeated as infiltration teams walked into the same killing ground, adjusting routes and numbers but never escaping the fundamental geometry of the valley. And by September 23, 37 Japanese corpses littered the floor. By September 24, the number had grown into the hundreds, and still the enemy returned, driven by doctrine that demanded attack regardless of cost. While Pope refined deception operations, transmitting false radio traffic, moving openly by day to suggest disorder, encouraging the enemy's belief that one more push would break the Americans. And as ammunition stocks grew through nighttime resupply, Pope's position only strengthened, his Marines becoming masters of illumination warfare, psychological dominance, and disciplined fire control, until on the night of September 24 the Japanese finally committed a full-scale assault, beginning with a coordinated mortar barrage followed by waves of 20 to 30 soldiers advancing across the valley floor under flares that burned away the darkness they depended on. And Pope waited until over 80 enemy troops were fully inside the kill zone before giving the order to fire, unleashing a storm of machine gun bursts, rifle volleys, and perfectly timed illumination that swept the valley clean, wave after wave collapsing under interlocking fire, bodies piling so densely that survivors stumbled over the dead. And although some Japanese reached grenade range and forced brutal close combat, the momentum broke, morale shattered, and by dawn the valley lay silent beneath the weight of defeat, with 147 Japanese bodies visible and many more dragged into caves or left unseen. And when no movement came from the ridges and no supply runs followed, Pope understood the enemy had withdrawn or been destroyed. And as Stevens cleaned his Browning that had fired over 8,000 rounds and Martinez tallied ammunition expenditures that exceeded any previous Pacific engagement, battalion headquarters confirmed what Pope already knew: the Japanese defense in the sector had collapsed. And although Company B had lost 168 killed and wounded, the exchange ratio told the real story. Entire Japanese units annihilated by tactics they never adapted to in time, and as the surviving 74 Marines formed ranks amid gaps where their comrades once stood, Pope knew Horseshoe Valley would be remembered not merely as a battlefield, but as the place where Marines learned that doctrine must bend or die, where illumination defeated darkness, where psychology mattered as much as firepower, and where a young captain proved that sometimes the worst position on the map was the deadliest place an enemy could choose to enter.